I don't know what more I can say about Beetlejuice that hasn't already been said. It is one of those perfect movies for me. It's like Jaws, Jurassic Park, like Ghostbusters, the first one. It's one of those films that captures a lightning in the bottle type of experience that it never will get old. It was made in the 80s, and that people can watch it today in the 2020s and still have a good time. You could have never heard of Beetlejuice ever before, and you put this movie in, even if it's a 40-year-old film, you will have a blast watching it. It is lightning in a bottle to me. Now, naturally, there are some actors who have had things in the real world that have impacted some people's enjoyment of this film, and that is unfortunate. How people in the real world tend to do things and kind of destroys their fictional characters. But to me, Charles is not his actor. Charles is Lydia's father. Charles is the bird watcher. Charles is a character, and Charles can be played by anybody. If you don't like the actor that originally played Charles, then all you really have to do is recast him with somebody who looks like him, who you can make up design and give him the blondish hair, a little portly look, a little slightly disheveled, but still refined. You can make Charles out of anybody. Charles is not the actor that plays him. That's what I want to say. So if you find that Charles, the original actor, ruins your experience, then I am sorry about that. I really am. I watched this before I ever learned about that, and I ended up loving it. And it does not impact my enjoyment of the film, but I don't condone the actions of those things naturally. But Charles is just a fictional character. This is a fictional universe. These are fictional people. And that's how I've always viewed these films. Fiction. They're fiction. I don't really see the actors. I see the characters that they're playing. And that's... I mean, maybe that's just my unique perspective, obviously. But that's how I view these things. I don't view characters... The people playing characters. I view the actual story. The fictional world. The character. That's what I see. And of course, this is one of those lightning in a bottle films that, much like the Ghostbusters, sparked a TV series, an animated series, a veritable classic that you could watch this even if you don't like the Beetlejuice live action for certain actors. This one might be the one for you. Because while Charles is in it, he is not played by the actor who played him in this. So you might feel a little bit better about that. The only thing that I didn't really like about the animated series is that the husband and wife characters, who were the main characters in this film, are not in this film. The main character in Beetlejuice is Beetlejuice himself. Now, the first season, made Lydia the main character. Everything was told from her perspective. We got to see her home life. We got to see her going to that school for girls. We got to see all of the things in the Netherworld from Lydia's perspective. Beetlejuice is more of the wacky character, the wacky sidekick that makes things happen, that gets the plot going. But Lydia was the reactive character. She reacted to the wacky, kooky things, and it was a lot of fun. Sometime by, I want to say, season 3, that changed. Lydia seemed to stop being the main character, and we started to focus far more on Beetlejuice as the main character. And at least to me, that lost me a little bit. That kind of weakened the show. You shouldn't put the entire story from his perspective that weakens the character of Beetlejuice. Much like this film, Beetlejuice is not the main character, even though the film is named after him. The main characters are the families that interact with the wacky netherworld and then end up getting Beetlejuice involved, and then they have to get rid of Beetlejuice afterwards. And that was the perfect way to utilize this character. And the season 1 and into season 2, Lydia being the main character with Beetlejuice as the sidekick was the perfect way to utilize him in this setting. So what do they do with the sequel to the first film? Well, the sequel doesn't really interact with this one all that much, though I would have preferred that you recast Charles and not do what you did. They did find a middle ground with the sequel of Beetlejuice in Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Now, at first I believed that Beetlejuice Beetlejuice was going to be one of those heartless sequels, one of those creatively absent, creatively bankrupt things that there are no new original ideas left in the world, and all we're doing is sequels, spin-offs, and remakes of everything that currently exists, and we're not doing new things unless it's an indie project. And even then, in indie projects, there are a lot of things that are inspired by other things, and then they end up derivative in it. But that's usually how creativity works, is that we derive from things that inspire us. It's how music works, it's how film works, it's how video games work. It's derivative. A lot of things are derivative. For example, the Dante's Inferno video game. Very good video game, but it is derivative of God of War, which is the Greek-era God of War, not the Norse one. And there are so many Greek-era God of War clones out there, derivative works of the God of War combat style, that type of gameplay mechanic, and that's fine. Some people might say, oh, it's creatively bankrupt because of this. Now, why am I going off on a tangent about this? Well, it's because that's what I thought this was. That's what I thought Beetlejuice was going to end up being. That it was going to be creatively bankrupt. That it was going to be one of those sequels because we got Jenna Ortega. Just because people like Jenna Ortega, that's why she's here. But it ended up shocking me. It did. It ended up shocking me that wasn't the direction entirely that they were going to take Beetlejuice in. I ended up learning that they wanted to do a Beetlejuice sequel for decades. For a long time they wanted a Beetlejuice sequel out there, but it just didn't happen until now. I don't know why it didn't happen until now, but here we are. We finally have our sequel. Is it as good as the first one? No. I went into this film knowing that it was not going to be as good as the first film. I did. I rewatched it, I loved it, then I watched this, and I did like it. If this is an A, this is a B. B is still good. B is still passing. B is still a good grade. It's just not as good as an A. A is awesome. B is just okay. It's a good film, but it's not awesome. Now, the best parts of this film would have to be the Beetlejuice character, because Keaton did, I believe, if I remember correctly, looking some stuff up about this, is that he didn't want to be in the film for too long. He just wanted like 10 to 15 minutes of screen time. He didn't want the whole thing to be about him. And that's what I would agree with. I don't want the whole film to be about the Beetlejuice character. I want the Beetlejuice character to be an inciting, to be the incident, the cause of a problem that then you would have to solve. He might solve a problem that is currently existing, that he's trying to market himself as the guy that solves that problem, but then he becomes a problem, and then you have to get rid of him later on too. And that, I do think, is utilized well in Beetlejuice. The Lydia character, I think she's fine, ultimately. Not that she didn't really have too much to work with. She didn't really have too gothic of a personality in this. She just had the fashion, the look. And they kept that look for the Lydia character in this, and that was fine. And of course, Catherine O'Hara is perfect in this film. She walks right back into this character as if she never left, as if it hadn't been 30 years. But even Keaton did. Both of these guys are legends. They walk back into their characters like the first movie was yesterday. They walked right back in, and they were perfect in the roles. Catherine O'Hara is great. The new arrivals, like Willem Dafoe and Monica Bellucci, they're very good as well. I liked their characters, but we didn't have too much time with them. If you were going to do a sequel and you were going to introduce a bunch of new characters, you needed to give some more time to them. The Willem Dafoe character ends up being a joke, a passing joke. And if that's the point, then I can respect that. If he's just a bit, then that's fine. And if Monica Bellucci ends up just being, not Bellucci, but if Monica ends up just being a bit, then that's fine as well. However, they kind of make her out to be the ultimate villain, the penultimate villain. But we don't really see too much of her. For the most part, the penultimate villain in the first film was Beetlejuice himself. At first, it was the ghost couple trying to get the family that moved into their house out of their house. Now, it's Beetlejuice that they need to get out, and they end up befriending the family that moves in. In this, the inciting incident that causes Beetlejuice to get involved is a good inciting incident, but it is not her. She is the inciting incident that gets him weirded out. And then there's an inciting incident with her that get him involved in their life, and then she gets involved at the end of the film, and it doesn't really work too well here. Everybody just kind of runs into the middle at the end of the movie, and they try to resolve it really quick. They resolve to a bunch of films really quick. I think this could have been 2 movies. I think this was a bunch of separate scripts that they took ideas from each one and commingled it together to make a full movie. And I don't know if that was the best idea they could have done with. The original idea, the inciting incident that gets Beetlejuice involved in their lives again, is that the General Ortega character ends up, she doesn't believe in ghosts. She's not a goth girl like her mom. She's a rebel from the goth by dressing normally. She's one of those geeky types that's all about science and stuff, which is a pretty interesting idea. Like, the reverse trope is that your mom's a goth, so you want to be normal instead of your mom's normal, so you want to be... I like that. That's a good idea. She ends up actually seeing ghosts by running into a teenage dude who she doesn't know is a ghost, and she ends up hanging out with him. She ends up liking him, and he's a ghost. That you don't know this, and she doesn't know this until later on in the film. You start to suspect it by the second visit with him when you get to meet his parents, and you never see their faces, and they don't really seem to be all there. So you start to suspect that maybe his parents are ghosts, and maybe he's not, but who knows? So that's an exciting little mystery in and of itself for the audience to solve. And then there's a clause in the handbook for the dead that you could swap your life for somebody else, but they have to give it willingly, yada yada. That's a pretty interesting, funny little idea that he ends up tricking her into doing, getting her to swap her life for his. And then she finds out about that, so she gets Beetlejuice involved to to break that contract so she could get her daughter back. And of course, Beetlejuice will only do that if she agrees to marry him. So she agrees to do that. He's the fiance in the real world at the start. He ends up being a douche. She knows he's a douche. She doesn't know he's a douche. So she's kind of getting walked over yet again, both in the real world and in the neither world. So that might be why she's mad at her. And it's an interesting little family dynamic. I do like this. I just feel like these two, this storyline kind of doesn't fit into this storyline. I think getting him involved to undo that contract is a good way to bring Beetlejuice back into the picture. And then once he's brought back into the picture, the next inciting incident, the climax, is to get him out of the picture again. So they try to figure out a way to null the marriage contract, but not before finding out that he's a douche nozzle. So they get rid of him, and then they get rid of him, and then they reconcile. And then maybe in the third film, we get to finally get some origins on the Beetlejuice character. We learn about his ex-wife, and that could have been a thing. I would have preferred that for the Beetlejuice trilogy, is that we learn about the character by the final film. But in the second film, for what it is, for what they tried to do, it's not bad. It isn't. The Monica Bellucci character is very good. It's very interesting. That flashback is very funny because he's speaking in a flashback in a black and white color in a foreign language. It's perfect. It's really good. It's just, I wanted to see more of that story, but it gets shoved into a film that already has a story that needs to tell that story, but it resolves that story in a kind of rushed way so that they could get to this story instead, and it ends up being rushed on both ends at the end of the film. It introduces concepts expertly and introduces ideas expertly. There's just too many ideas. There's too many cooks. I think you need to cut it in half and focus on one half and then focus on the other half in the next film. But as it is, I'm happy with what they did. I'm just not as happy as I was when I watched the first film. But I am very excited to see a third film if they do it. And they definitely need to, and they definitely should. They definitely should just call it Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Then that's all I've got for this one.